the royal cubit conversation is kind of interesting. If I can find that document here, if you want to go there.
When you say the royal cubit conversation, you're meaning how all these things are a specific amount of. What do you mean specifically?
It appears that on a number of these artifacts that I've scanned and measured and found the dimensions of and divided by a royal finger, which is 18.7 millimeters, according to Isaac Newton.
Okay.
So if you find the dimension of like the length and you divide by 18.7, a lot of times you're getting whole numbers. And a lot of times you're getting like perfect fractions of numbers. And so people are going to say like, oh, it's just random, it's just coincidence. But if we can show through scanning enough of these and through analyzing enough of that data that it's just mathematically impossible to have that much coincidence happen and that yes, they were in fact using this measurement system, then you can prove that these things were accurate on a whole different scale than just roundness. You can prove that they're accurate to like on a dimensional scale as well. So
like a 3-dimensional scale.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just like, this thing is perfectly round to within, a 100th of a millimeter or whatever.
Right.
You can say that they were able to create an object with a mouth opening that was exactly what they wanted it to be to within, like a thousandth of an inch or whatever, which is a whole new like mystery with these things because how could they measure that? Like how could they verify?
How? Right, exactly.
Right.
Did they have computers?
Right. Like what tools were they using to verify that like something microscopic in a lot of cases that you can't even see with your own eyes, and they're achieving that level of precision on these things. So that's a mystery. So this guy at the top, this is Adam Young's artifact, right? So if you look at this and the unsigned.io did a report on this that identified some sacred geometry in it. I'm going to stay away from that because I didn't completely understand the report to be, totally honest with you. But what we do find in here, if you just look at the measurements, and unfortunately, so this scan doesn't have the most accurate, like it's down to 1/10 of a millimeter on this scan. You can see, when you look at like the height, for example, which is, on here, it's that 6 and 4. So it's 6.412 royal fingers. But if you back all the way up, if you look at the millimeters on the height, it's 119.9 millimeters. So they didn't go to the 100th or to the 1,000th of a millimeter on this, so it wasn't the greatest scan. But what you find from that when you divide by 18.7 is you get 6.412 royal fingers in height. And so you look at that and it's like, okay, well, that's a meaningless number, and nobody's really found anything, with that number. But what 64 represents is the grid of life in sacred geometry. And so I think that when unsigned.io found the flower of life as it relates to this artifact with all those circles that he was doing, that what he had actually found was the grid of life. And that whoever made this thing was embedding the 6.4 as a sign that, hey, this is the grid of life. And the grid of life is basically the flower of life, except it's like a 3-dimensional version of it. So it uses tetrahedrons instead of circles, which this is a 3-dimensional object. So that makes sense. So and it's accurate to 6.4 to within 9/1000ths of an inch. So it's similar accuracy in the dimensions. So in the height dimension, if this is really what they were going for, 6.4, I think it was. It's similar. It's equal to like the accuracy of the circles that we find in it. And all anybody's been talking about is the accuracy of the circles for the longest time. But I do think the dimensions are actually something that we really need to look at too. The width, the second row down there is 84.3 millimeters. And if you divide that by the 18.7, you get 4.5 royal fingers to within 6/1000ths. The neck is phi squared royal fingers. 2.618 is phi squared royal fingers. So you've got to take phi or phi, and then you got to square it, and you get 2/1000ths of an inch deviation. I don't know what 1.2 is, to be honest with you. Maybe somebody on the show can leave in the comments. What
I'm sure somebody will know.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Right. The mouth opening on this one is very precise to 3/1000ths of an inch of 2.0 royal fingers. So So that one is highly accurate. And then the lip is pi royal fingers. So the lip is like the outside of the circle on the top, 3.114 to within 5/1000ths of an inch. You know, so I don't know, man. I mean, that one looks pretty compelling, although the measurements and the dimensions of it. But that one seems like it's lining up to this subunit of the royal cubit to within a high degree of accuracy,
right?
Because it's like all of these measurements. But then you don't find. This is really the only one where I'm finding these sacred geometry numbers. Like I'm not finding like pi row of fingers in the other ones that I've scanned so far. So I'm just finding like straight up either whole or fractions of row of fingers.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So this second one, which is the spinner here, this guy, when you look at it, again, the height is 4 royal fingers to within 7/1000ths of an inch. The width is 6 to within 1/1000th of an inch. The mouth opening is 2 and 2/6. I think they're using sixths as opposed to thirds, but you could say thirds, and you're less than 5/1000ths of an inch. And the lip is 3.5 to within 4/10,000ths of an inch. So less than 1/1000th of an inch, 40% of 1/1000th.
Right.
So very, very accurate on that. And it kind of just keeps, we don't have to go through every one of these, but you see the same thing on the thin wall artifact. You see very tight tolerances. And then I guess I just kind of probably close with this one, which is freaking huge and heavy.
Holy moly.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Oh, this is the biggest one out here.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, that thing's huge.
Good Lord. Look at that, people.
Right.
How big did they get?
It feels like a 45-pound barbell
plate.
Yeah,
that thing's legit.
Is this as big as they get, or did
I mean, in terms of the hard stone, yeah, they don't get a lot bigger in terms of the hard stone. Alabaster, the stuff that's like the imitation of this stuff, they can get much bigger than that.
You can feel the ribbing on the inside of it, where they use tools to carve it out.
Yep. And that one has good date. There's images of that one way in the 20th century,
really,
yeah. There's that one's. I think I feel really good about all these. I'm not gonna buy them if I didn't feel good about them, obviously, but I feel really good about that one. And that one is measuring out in whole royal fingers, but it's not as precise as some of these smaller ones, right? But when you look at the height, it's 7.02 royal fingers to within 1/100th of an inch, or just less than 2/100ths of an inch. The width is 13 royal fingers to within, it's a similar type of accuracy there. The neck, I might be able to get rid of that neck one just because I had to go to circumference there, and usually you're not seeing circumference on the neck. But even the 8.925 is pretty close to 9. The mouth is 4.99 royal fingers, so that's, you're talking 8/1000ths of an inch, and the lip is 9.95. So, and the handles are almost always in circumference as opposed to diameter. That's, 5/5000ths of an inch. And so you're talking
astonishing, dude.
It's incredible. I mean, and it's all whole royal fingers on the biggest one, which makes sense because they don't need to go to fractions on the biggest one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's that one. So
that's so wild, dude.
It's pretty crazy, man.
It really is. Yeah. And it's really cool that you've been able to connect with all these people like Ben Kirkwick and, the Snake Bros and all these guys who do all these trips out there and are fascinated by this stuff and talk about this stuff.
No doubt.
You'll be able to get them on your podcast and let them look at this stuff.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Yeah. Ben was my first guest on the podcast.
Was he really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
He's a great dude. I mean, all those guys are great people with Snake Bros.
Was that his first time seeing these things in real life?
It was.
And holding them?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. He was like a kid in a candy store.
Pants?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to. It's one thing to see them behind a glass or whatever, but when you when you see these things, you get a sense that these are freaking old.
Yeah.
It's different.
When you go to a museum, are you allowed to touch them?
No. I mean, sometimes they might bring them out if you request it special with gloves and
Yeah, we were sitting at dinner last night in a restaurant, and you literally poured your iced tea into one of them to see how
Yeah.
how much water it would hold.
Yeah. To show.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You're a madman.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one that was this guy, and it's the spinner, and it still spins with the water in
Right.
it. And it actually, this one actually, when you measure the volume of the inside of this one, it's exactly an ancient system of Egyptian measurement. It's a heket. It's like
volume measurement.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's like 1/16 of a heket, which happens to also unfortunately be 300 cc's. So that's a modern measurement.
So the volume of all of these things could have sacred geometrical numbers.
It could have just numbers that were important for whatever, either trade, or you had to know how much you were paying to like fill your thing up with whatever liquid or perfume or whatever it was that you were buying. Potentially, like I don't freaking know, but those are some possibilities that the volume actually did matter.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to see like how the volume of all of these different vases compare to each other. Mm-hmm. That might be a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
you could find something out. You could maybe dig deeper into what these things were for.
Right.
Do you have any visuals that show like some of the measurements or the scans that were done on these things?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So which one would you want to?
Oh yeah, any of them. Whatever one you think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean this one's pretty great. This is the gold handle one.
Placas.
Yeah. Which is just a.
And why is the gold? How did they get the gold on there? What is that?
It's a question.
Maybe that was added later.
It could be. Yeah. It could be. I really don't know. I mean, supposedly they say it's original, but it's really kind of hard to know. But this is the certificate of authenticity that comes with it. I mean, you get a different one based on.
And is it real gold?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's very, it's thin. It's like gold plate, basically. But, that one will spin perfectly for like a very long period of time. Wow. This is a receipt from 1975, that like describes the thing. And then we go into the CT scan report.
Right.
And again, this was done by a third party. They don't know, anything about like the project or whatever, but it gives you these measurements on the artifact and it tells, and you can compare the different measurements to try to, get a sense for like, the symmetry involved in it. So just for example, this measurement is of the X and Y axis of the width of the artifact. So it's like the.
Can you punch in on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So.
Oh wow! Look at that.
That's the.
Damn.
Image. Yeah. So the measurement is 128.457 millimeters on the y-axis, and on the x-axis it's 128.476 millimeters. Yeah. So you're talking 2/100ths of a millimeter, which is like less than 1/1000th of an inch. I mean, crazy deviation there. The mouth opening is a little bit more difficult a lot of times because of like damage for whatever reason, like on the inside of a lot of these things. But yeah, I mean, you got 52.06 versus 52.112. So, do the math there. I think I'm not doing the math there.
Yeah, that's minuscule.
That's a lot of math. Yeah, but very small.
What is that one right there? So zoom in right there. What did that say right there? NOM 52.26, 52.30.
Nominal. So it's not a real measurement. The actual measurement is the measurement number. The nominal is kind of like they create this CAD model of what the perfect circle would look like, and what I think it's kind of like what they think if they were to. They take a slice of it basically, and then they do a slice like all the way around. Yeah. And then they try to create like a nominal measurement, but it's not a real measurement. And then, how to measure the handles. And a lot of times, we haven't even talked about like the royal cubit. And
right. We got the sacred geometry baked into these bad boys.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But on this one, on the handle measurement, on a lot of these things, the handle measurement is actually a circumference measurement. So the distance there is meaningless in terms of royal cubits, but when you multiply it by pi and you get the circumference of the handles, which would have on almost all of these been the widest part of the original block that they were using,
right,
you get a number that is like a royal finger, which is a subunit of a royal cubit, which we can talk about in a little while. But on most of the other measurements, it's all diameter. But on the handles, it's usually what I'm finding is it usually shows up in terms of circumference. So that's that one. A lot of I should show you the. I had them,
and they measure the insides.
I had them measure the inside of the holes just to see if there was anything there, in terms of the royal cubit measurements. And but I haven't really found any correlation. So it doesn't seem like that's a measurement that they were trying to do.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that would have been the 7th. But I think I've identified like 6 on these things.
So there's 2 questions. Was this purposeful precision? Or was this just because it was so damn easy for them that didn't matter?
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the precision as it relates to the measurements, like the royal cubits, then it's pretty obvious that they intended to do that on a lot of these things. It's like, on this round one, for example, it's 4 royal fingers tall, or digits. We'll call it maybe a digit tall. People call it either one.
So it's 4 fingers tall.
4 fingers tall, 6 fingers wide. So, 6.0 to just a couple of thousandths of an inch away from Isaac Newton's 18.7 millimeter royal finger, like the measurement that he defined, and he realized that the Great Pyramid, the Step Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and Great Bent, Step, and Red Pyramid were all used this measurement of a royal cubit, which was 52.36 centimeters.
Wow.
So 523.6 millimeters was a royal cubit for all of those pyramids. And he found the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid is 10 by 20 cubits, exactly. And a subunit of that we know is the finger. And so there's 28 fingers in every one of those. So every finger is 18.7 millimeters. And when you measure a lot of these things, you find that measurement in the dimensions of the artifact on a lot of these things. Now, I've only scanned, 12, I think, so far, something like that. So I got more work to do, but I have found that royal finger measurement in a lot of them. Not every one of them, but a lot of them. And it's consistent because it's in 4 out of the 6 measurements, or, and it's way more than coincidental that you'd be finding perfect, 0.0 royal fingers, in these things. So it's pretty clear that at least on some of these things that they were using that system of measurement to create it, and it's very clear that dimension and that accuracy of manufacture is it's one thing to make a circle, right? And it's one thing to be able to say, okay, I got a circle that's 1/1000th of an inch of perfect roundness, but it's another to have a dimension that's perfectly round or perfectly precise. And that's one thing that hasn't been really explored on these artifacts in any meaningful way by anybody really yet. And so it's one of the things that by measuring these things, I'm going to be able to hopefully shed some more light on that. Is it just random? Is it just coincidence? And I just happen to have found these things in the first handful that I've measured, and I'm never going to find it again. But you don't see inches, you don't see centimeters, you don't see I'm getting 0 hits on just random systems of measurement, random metrological systems. You don't see. You always see it on that one specific Isaac Newton's 18.7 that the pyramids were built off. But yeah, this is kind of interesting. This is the surface deviation report of this specific artifact with the gold handles on it. And you can pretty clearly see that the deviation is in, this is the scale of the deviation. So, it goes from, and this is in millimeters. So the surface deviation is not as precise as the the dimensions or the roundness necessarily. But what you see is, and some of this could be due to surface residue, that I just didn't like, that just wasn't cleaned off, because these are very, very.
When you say surface deviation, what does that mean?
So it's like this part of the object right here that you see in bright orange is 0.3 millimeters above the average.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the blue is going like down in elevation.
Exactly.
And the orange is up in elevation.
Yeah. You can kind of think of like the dark blue as just below sea level, the light blue as sea level, the green as land, and like yellow and red as like,
Volcano islands.
Yeah. Like
Got it.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting because you see that clearly, you see this yellow line going across the middle of it. I think that says it was turned, that you've got this whole patch of yellow that goes across the middle of it. That indicates that a lathe was used, I think, and this is not the best example, I got better examples, but that a lathe was used to manufacture this thing. And then you got this blue line, right there that goes all the way around it that also indicates, this thing was turned on a lathe. But this, and again,
then how does that explain the handles?
Yeah. So what they would have done is left the material between the handles and then come back and got that later. And you can kind of see maybe they did chisel that on this specific artifact because, some of these blue like that, that area, this area between the handles, maybe that was chiseled potentially. But what they would have done, let me see if I can find it here. I'm going to probably, let's see. No, not there. What they would have done, is they would have. Well, I'll just try
maybe
to
they use
describe
some
it.
kind of like dark magic to make these things soft, and they could just mold them however they wanted.
It's possible, but there is really good evidence for lathe use on most of these things, like on a lot of these things.
Right.
So let me see the thin wall granite, for example. So this one is this is the certificate for the thin one that we looked at where you can shine the light through it. This is the surface deviation report for that artifact.
Look at that, dude.
Right.
That's pretty telling.
Yeah, pretty telling there. That was turned. Clearly.
Can you punch in a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. Whoever did this.
It's like ribbed.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't see that.
You can't see it to the naked eye.
With your naked eye. It looks completely flat. It looks completely like, yeah. So whoever made this isn't like, modern day machine that would have made this with like lasers because you would never get this
right.
Right. You wouldn't get that.
Well, is that how they do it today with when they cut granite? What do they use to cut like precise granite today?
They use, it's like they've got a handful of different methods, but it's like very, very sturdy on rods, like metal rods, and they're like turning it and they're like just like shaving it off at like perfect. It's computer guided 5-axis CNC mills is my understanding. And it's like they're shaving it off like to perfect roundness. It's not like you'd be turning it and then changing the tool and going to a higher level and then turning it again, like is kind of what we see here.
So not a lathe.
This is a lathe.
No, I mean today.
Oh,
it wouldn't be a traditional like what we think of as a lathe.
Yeah,
it would be.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just a very sophisticated lathe today.
Good Lord. Now, what is that red? That's because it's popping out more? Or?
Yeah, so the red, a lot of people, talk about the handles and talk about how the handles are not as precise as the rest of the object and that this shows that that's the case because of the redness. What you have to understand about the handles is that on every artifact, they're offset, like they're not directly across from each other. And so people like debunker people, they're all like, see that it was handmade, it's like clearly handmade. But in reality, it's on every single artifact, and it's almost always like when you see the side that the handles are closer together, there's some portion of it that's like more visually attractive, like this one, for example. You got this like wide open piece on the granite. That's the side that the handles are closer to. So in my mind, they intentionally had the handles pushed forward to the side where it's more visually attractive. And I think this is a good example of that. There's a bunch of examples of that, but I think they did it on purpose. Like I think the handles were pretty clearly shifted together on one side on purpose on all of these because it's consistent. You don't find any where the handles are directly across from each other. But what that does, the software, the program is assuming that the handles are supposed to be directly opposite of each other, and so when they're not, you get these red lines on the thing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how it's almost like pushed forward.
Right. And does that speak to the function? Whatever the function was. I don't know. It's like, again, that's like pure speculation land. That just I don't know that we know. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting. And then you've got the thickness report, which is pretty cool. So. You can tell, and you can tell that this is where they've really thinned out the wall on the thin wall vase, and you can see kind of the thickness and
so the green is the thickest.
The green is the thickest, yeah, and it's always thickest at the bottom.
And I'm guessing the purple is the thinnest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's that band there that's super thin. And unfortunately the company EMS wasn't able to stack these measurements at the exact same height on both sides, so we can't really like match up the bottom versus the bottom and say these are at the exact same height. They're just kind of arbitrarily picking points. So it's not as if you can compare 4.574 to 4.435. But what we did find, and I've got tools like wall thickness gauge, is that when you do that, the wall thickness is one of those other measurements that's always extraordinarily accurate, especially on the precision made ones. Like the wall thickness on one side at one horizontal axis is going to be almost exactly as thick as the wall on the other side of the artifact. Yeah. So however they were doing it, however they were hollowing out the interior, it's not like they had like a fork, like a stick with a stone on the end of it. I mean, it was much more sophisticated of a process than that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So pretty interesting. I mean, that's that, and then
God, it's so fascinating, man.
Yeah. You're going to find some really crude 5000 BC stone artifacts, but 4500 to 3100 BC, kind of that pre-dynastic time period, is where a lot of these come from.
And from that time period, what are the tools that we have evidence for?
Yeah, I mean, it's garbage. It's like, you're talking about like, and this is the part where I don't want to like. I think very highly of our ancestors, right? And this is the part where the detractors are always like, they just thinks our ancestors are idiots, but they didn't have tools that were capable of doing this. So when you look at the tools in the archaeological record, I mean, you're talking about like flint chisels, you're talking about copper chisels, you're talking about just
pounding stones,
exactly. Sticks,
right.
Sticks with where you attach a rock to the bottom of the stick and you stick it inside of this thing and you twist it around,
right?
And that's how supposedly you get wall thickness that's perfectly the exact same thickness on this side of the artifact as on this side of the artifact. Right. I mean, to a hundredth of a millimeter.
Right.
I mean, and you can't do that by just like turning a stick in here.
Right.
But that's the tools that exist in the archaeological record from this time period. Mm-hmm. It's a time period that we know almost nothing about. So and it's the hardest stones on earth, and it's the hardest material on earth to work with. And so it's like you talked about the pyramids. It's like the oldest stuff always seems to be the best. It always seems to be the most precise, and it's like you go back and you look at ancient Egypt and the structures that were built and the pyramids that were built. The oldest stuff is always the best. What's similar with these objects, and it's like, to not have, it's just a huge question mark to not have any tools that are capable of producing something like this, and yet here they are. Here's the artifacts, and going back to pre-dynastic times, Egypt wasn't even united. It was Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt were two completely separate areas until Scorpion King came along in 3200, 3100 BC, killed the king and united Upper and Lower Egypt, and then they had this glory. This is the story, from the establishment, that they had this incredible couple of 1,000-year run of pyramid building and creating all these incredible ancient structures. So at this time period, in the pre-dynastic time period, it was literally, you're talking very primitive people, very primitive tools. That's the story that we're given.
So if we wanted to, could we recreate a granite vase that's as precise as that one today?
I think so.
You think so?
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah.
How would we do it?
With a 5-axis mill, with like a very sophisticated lathe, and you would probably design it on a computer. You would just could it be done by hand? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that we couldn't today create one of the precision artifacts by hand. But
we would need very expensive machines and computer programs and stuff to create that. It's not like a hobbyist couldn't do this.
Correct. Yeah, a couple $100,000. You're talking about machines that cost that much, and there's probably companies that you could hire to do this. I haven't seen any, and this is part of the issue. Like, if people can do it and people can make these, and it's so cheap and so easy, because I've seen some debunking videos that's like, there's a company in China that can just go make one of these for like $50. Well, nobody's doing that. Like, you don't see that.
Is there any videos of people making these?
Right. No. And there's no evidence that they exist, So, and when you look at the market and you're studying the market like I did in 2023, you look at the inventory that's there and available online. It's not like there's like a plethora of new artifacts coming online at all times. Like right now, if you go out and you try to buy some of these, you're not going to find any. Like, there's none available right now. And if it was that easy to produce these and to make them fake and cheap and easy, and the dealers were like all like criminals, then you would see these all over the place. Like, you would be able to buy them from anybody, anywhere, because they could make a tremendous markup. But we don't see that. And we don't see duplicates. That's the other thing. We don't see like the same artifact produced twice ever. You don't. That's not a thing. So it's not as if
all of these are so different. Man.
Yeah, totally.
And like this one, they don't have flat bottoms. They spin.
Right.
So if you're making a vase, right? You think nowadays if you make a vase, it's like to hold something in it, right?
Yeah.
Flowers or a decorative piece that sits on a table.
Right.
But if this is a decorative piece that's meant to sit on a table, why wouldn't you make a flat bottom? Why do these all have these rounded, curved bottoms to them?
Right.
They don't, like, they wobble, right? Like that one right there.
Yeah.
Or this one right here.
Yeah, all these spin. Yeah. Obviously all the round bottoms spin, but like even, like this one, like, does not look like it should be able to spin, right?
Right.
But most of them do. They intentionally rounded the bottom.
God, this thing's heavy.
Yeah, it's a big piece of granite. Yeah. And it's like, why would you intentionally round the corners off of the bottom to like maximize or minimize friction? Why would you want it to be wobbly and to be able to tip over? Now, I think if you ask like a historian or someone or one of the debunker channels, they're going to be like, well, it's they kept them in sand. They kept them. They wanted to be
sand.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Oh, they said that. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like in their houses or whatever. But even that big one, that massive granite one over there, that's gonna.
This one?
Yeah, that's gonna spin. That's got a round bottom. Yeah, it's heavy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's
Well, my table's kind of messed up.
yeah. But yeah, it's crazy. Like you see it on.
Look at that.
Yeah. Right.
Huh.
Yeah, if you put these on like a flat granite table and you spin them,
I bet.
it's all day. Like check out this guy, this Brescia guy. And like, so if you're making modern reproductions, these are the kinds of things that like people today, like if you're making these, they wouldn't know that, like people wouldn't, I don't know. There's just too many, there's a lot of reasons to think that these are, and when you look at them, I mean, these things have got some age to them, man. Like,
Oh my God, yeah.
right? I mean, it's different when you like,
We're holding 1,000-year-old relics made by people that existed thousands of years ago.
right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's one of the coolest things
They're
out
like,
there.
yeah, they're like little time machines, man.
Yeah, totally. And they all have a different story. And that's the thing, like you, I mean, there's a possibility. I think there's 3 possibilities for each and every one of these that exist in the world, right? And the possibilities of when they were made. And you could say, just starting in the present day and going back in time, you could say, okay, they were either made in modern times as a forgery, as a fake, or they were made by the ancient Egyptians, or they were made by some precursor civilization, like some lost civilization.
Yeah.
There's actually, I mean, there's some good arguments for that. Like there's some really good, like, I mean, Ben Van Kerkwijk does a great job, kind of pushing that, like, putting that idea forward. You don't see them after after like 2200 BC, pretty much. Like you don't see any of these hardstone vases
After 2200
anywhere.
BC.
Yeah, like the intermediate period, like after the
Right.
Yeah, you don't see, like that's kind of when Egypt fell into like this like despair. It was like a tough time for them, and then they came out like 100 years later. But you don't see any after that, and there's a question as to whether or not you see any of them after 2650 BC, which is when Dozier or Zozier, nobody really knows how to pronounce his name, but the step pyramid guy, the guy that buried himself underneath the step pyramid with like 40,000 of these things. There's a question as to whether or not we really, if they make any of them after that point in time.